Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the United States and Canada launch of Katarina Castulla's book, Hold Successful Meetings. The book is part of Penguin's Expert Series. This book launched in Europe on April 15th and immediately became a bestseller in its category in France, Germany, and the Netherlands. Katerina and her assistant, Sophie, have and will share a link in the comments, but also on a banner on your screen multiple times throughout our time together today about not only where you can learn more about the book, there you see it on the bottom of your screen now, but also about how you can redeem or get your bonuses if you choose to buy the book at some point in the next few days. The bonuses will be available between now and midnight on Sunday, July the 18th, so just about 3.5 days from now. If we've not met, I am Michael S. Seaver. I'm an executive coach, leadership consultant, and speaker based in Phoenix, Arizona. I'm a member of the Forbes Coaches Council, and much of my work has been featured in Forbes, Thrive Global, Medium, and many other publications around the world. And my focus is really about authenticity, and I really love finding ways to bring employee life experiences into the workplace. And as you can see on the screen with me today is the best-selling author Katarina Castullo, who is also an executive coach, and she's founder of something called the Leader Path. Now, she is formerly the global business leader at Google, who was awarded a 5-star rating as an internal coach there. She's also a member of the Forbes Coaches Council, and she provides coaching to INSEAD and the Holt Ashridge Business School. Her insights have been featured in multiple publications, including Forbes, Fast Company, Thrive Global, Huffington Post, and more. Also on her website, theleaderpath.com, there's also a fun quiz that you can take as you learn more about how successful your meetings are. So just wanted to kind of level expectations, kind of set expectations for us with introducing us both. Now, when we think about our next probably 25 minutes or so together, the purpose of our time together is to just offer you a couple of brief insights into the Hold Successful Meetings book, but also a little bit into Katarina and to her coaching style and to her organization, the Leader Path. So we're going to talk about meetings, talk about a couple of brief insights with regards to meetings, like why they're so important, why they matter. How do we find ways to connect with others either before, during, or after meetings? How do we really make sure that all voices are heard at meetings? And both Katarina and I are marked introverts. So it's oftentimes hard in meetings to get us talking because we're not oftentimes the one that might speak up or say something. But we also want to make sure that you give little snippets about how to make sure that we're reducing any waste that might occur around your meetings. And of course, in today's society, how do we make the most of virtual meetings? Because we seem to be doing a lot more of that than we did a couple years back. So if you feel called to, go ahead and place an answer to this into the comments, and would love to be able to begin our discussion with a little bit of interaction. There might be a little bit of delay that comes through on our end. But what I want you to think about, so for everybody attending, if you feel called to, in comments, I want you to answer the question, what is the best advice you were ever given? Doesn't matter what it was. Could have come from a friend, a family member, somebody personal in your life. It could have been something that came from a professional contact, maybe a mentor, maybe a coach. But I just want you to think about it through the lens of, what's the best advice you were ever given? So if you feel called to, place your comment in the comments box. And then we just want to see kind of some of the things that come back. And so, Katarina, are you seeing them come through in the comments yet?
Not yet, but I'm looking forward to seeing some great advice.
Yeah, I think it's important, right? And the reason why I asked that question or encourage everybody to respond with that is that at the very end in the appendix of Hold Successful Meetings, Katarina inserts a number of questions that you might use to begin or launch your meetings. And that's just one. There are many inside the appendix, but I ask it really intentionally just to give you a little bit of a window into something that you might experience. Now, as you're making that, so I see a couple coming in, one says to always fully be present. Hannah says, listen to learn. Keep them coming, folks. Another one says 3 aspects to improve time: communication, communication, communication. Totally agree with that. Tremendous advice. See another one says 1 day at a time. Another person said trust is earned in pennies spent, and trust is earned in pennies and spent in dollars. Another good piece of advice. So keep them flowing, folks. If you have other comments about what is the best advice you were ever given, don't be afraid to put it in there. I see Mary put a comment in there. Make sure you have a schedule beforehand. Super duper important. Katerina confirmed that. Another one that has come through. Another piece of advice is The Year of Yes by Shonda Rhimes. Always be open to new opportunities. Thank you, Sheila, for that. Another one from Krista says, meet the person where they are at. I think that that's absolutely wonderful. Thank you so much, Krista, for putting that into the comments box. So when we think about how do we open dialogue, how do we create that personal connection, that is a really simple question that each of us can ask. That's not offensive in any way. It's just a great way to open dialogue. Dennis just said, hey, develop and provide an agenda beforehand. Good, set some clear expectations. Paul said, how do we focus in on creating value and not just consumption of resources? So good stuff there. And as they come through, I'll keep reading them off. But for everybody who's attending with us live, I just want you to think in the back of your mind, when you think about the meetings that you have day to day now in a normally professional context, like what % of them are actually value add, right? Where you really genuinely get something out of them, or they're really efficient, or they're really effective, or they actually do what you intend them to do. So just keep that number in the back of your mind. Maybe it's 10%, maybe it's 75%, maybe it's 100%, whatever the number is. Just think about that number. Maybe write it down on a sheet of paper or keep it close by, because I'm going to circle back to that at the end of our time together. So over the next probably 20 minutes or so, if you have any comments or questions, things that you would like to have Katerina address, please place them in comments and I'll do my best to be able to get to them. But I do have a couple of questions that I wanted to kind of kick us off with. So Katerina, are you ready?
Yes.
Okay. So for those of you, for those who are maybe meeting Katerina for the first time, I want you, Katerina, if you're willing to share a little bit more about your personal story and how you came to write Hold Successful Meetings.
Of course. I have to be honest with you, Michael, and our audience, if you had told me even 2 years ago that I would be the author of a book called Successful Meetings, I would have struggled to believe it. When my editor at Penguin, we had a discussion, they wanted me to contribute a leadership book for the Penguin Business Expert Series. They mentioned this topic. My first reaction was, meetings? I don't like meetings. And that's because I had in my mind this word, I had associated the internal boring status updates. Well, the truth is I spent my whole career, the first part of my career I was a salesperson. 8 of those years I was at Google managing some of the global partnerships. And my core role, my core job was to hold successful meetings with the clients. I just didn't call them meetings. I called them sales conversations, and millions were on the line. And I had to develop tools and techniques to make those conversations productive. And then I became a coach, whether one-to-one coaching or team coaching. And then again, my core craft was hold successful meetings with the clients. They would bring their most important, challenging problems, and we would solve them in the meeting. So the passion came, could I use those tools? Could I give those tools that I learned through sales and through coaching throughout my career to people that run everyday meetings? And meetings matter. As much as we say, meetings, and many of us will have a negative reaction, it is the best tool we have to inspire action. Otherwise, we wouldn't have salespeople. Politicians will not tour the country. It is something around being live, real time with someone that can help inspire action. It helps build culture in companies. It helps avoid misunderstandings. And on the other hand, most of us have suffered through really bad, ineffective meetings. It's $500 billion estimated the cost in US and the UK alone of badly organized meetings. So it's costly, it damages well-being, it damages the job satisfaction, it damages our career prospects if we don't know how to run successful meetings. So that's where the passion came of. It is a problem I'm passionate about solving, and it can be very impactful for people.
Big time. Yeah. So many minutes saved in a day, so much more opportunities for engagement and productivity if we do meetings well. And I think I read somewhere, I think it was the International Journal of Work and Stress, that pre-COVID, the number of interruptions that would happen in any given day was about 85, right? So imagine if you have 85 interruptions in any given day, and then you have to layer in a number of meetings, that takes away from your time to actually be productive. So love to be able to be really super efficient and effective with our time and find ways to create those levels of engagement with those folks around us. So when I was reading your book a few weeks back, Katerina, the first part is really focused in on purpose. And so inside the very beginning of the book, you talk about the 4D meeting framework, and the D's are define, develop, decide, and do. So will you offer a brief description of each D and share with our audience how they could assess their meetings a specific D outcome?
Yes. Let me start by saying that the number one mistake I see people making in their meetings is that they don't align the participants to work at the same time towards the same outcome. And I'll tell you what I mean. I was observing a meeting. It was a marketing team. They wanted to launch a webinar for their clients, and they wanted to decide which system to use to invite their clients. A simple decision. And there was chaos. I could see the leader was trying to make a decision. He was trying to put a vote there or gain consensus. You had one participant throwing ideas. How about we use system C or system D, and developing ideas all the time? A third participant did not see the problem. He was saying, I don't see why we're discussing this. Why don't we do what we've always done? So these were smart people, but they couldn't move forward. This meeting was chaotic. And I realized what was happening is they were trying to achieve different outcomes. So that's the birth of the 4D meeting framework. To solve any problem, you need to go through 4 stages. You need to define the problem or the goal, develop ideas to solve the problem. You need to decide which idea you're going to choose, and do what you decided. So what we can do in our meetings is make it explicit to the participants. Which D are we now? It could be a meeting only achieving 1 D. And let me explain what's the outcome. When it's a defined meeting, the outcome will be a problem definition or a goal definition. It could be a how might we. Let's define what's the issue here. If it is a develop meeting or a stage in the meeting, the outcome is a list of ideas. And I like actually having meetings that are only develop ideas. We don't go into decisions, because when you're trying to do both things at the same time, you have divergent and convergent thinking and you become less innovative. So when you're developing ideas, just do that. Align everybody. Let's produce ideas now. We're not going to decide. We're not going to implement. When you have a decide meeting, you make a decision. That's the outcome. And in the do, the outcome is action. Whether you inspire for action or you plan for action, that's what you want. So be clear with your participant what's the D outcome you're pursuing. And if you have more than 1 D in your meeting, do it in specific sections and signpost when you're moving from 1 D to another. That's one easy tip I would give for people to make their meetings more effective. And I spent the first half of the book of explaining how you can achieve, how you can make decisions with the group, how you can develop ideas. I think this is really important. And that's why I spent half of the book actually explaining and sharing tools how to achieve each one of the 4D outcomes.
Yeah, well said. And thank you for that. It made me think of Simon Sinek, right, and the whole golden circle, and how at the center of it really is this idea of why. And so the fact that you started the book with why, this idea of purpose, and really getting clear on the various purposes of what your meetings might be, matters immensely. And we even saw that through some of the comments, Katerina, that had come through about how do we make sure we have the right planning, the right schedule, the right agenda. Those things matter immensely. So maybe folks, were giving you just a little bit of additional deep dive into ways to peel back another layer of the onion and add just a little bit more schedule, a little bit more plan, a little bit more agenda to some of those things that matter. So when we make this transition in your book to the second kind of section, if you will, part 2, focuses a bit more on people and process, right? So you do a great job in part 1 talking about the 4 Ds and ways we can get the why and a lot of that specificity. And in part 2, it's a little bit more about people and process. And so chapter 7, you dive a little bit into how do we build connection, right, in a very empathetic way to help really pull out authenticity from people, or to deliver appreciation or recognition to others. But can you share a little bit more about why that's so important, and maybe offer an example or two?
Yes. I first learned the basis of that framework when I did in 2014, I did a master's in executive coaching. I was halfway through my Google time. And I learned humanistic psychology, and it was Carl Rogers that said to help any person grow, you need those 3 things. And he would say it is authenticity, empathy, and he would call the third one unconditional positive regard. I changed it to appreciation when I share it with clients. And I love that framework. And I went back to my sales job, Michael, and I started implementing it in my sales conversations, and the sales exploded. And I was trying to figure out what changed. And it wasn't the empathy. I had the empathy before. It wasn't the authenticity so much, because that I had before. It was the third bit, the appreciation. And what changed is that before I learned this framework, I would approach my clients. I was at Google, they were traditional businesses, and I would approach with this mentality. I need to convince them, to bring them to digital, to explain what digital is, with a little bit of a mentality, they don't get it. They're in traditional businesses. But when I changed the mindset to unconditionally appreciating them, I would go with the mentality, my clients are brilliant. They know their businesses 100 times better than I will ever do. They are competent. They're good at their jobs. They care, which was absolutely truth. And I would approach these conversations with this mentality. And of course, I would have a better connection, better results. Everything would be better. And why is this important in your meetings? Again, while I was at Google, there was some research the people analytic department did at Google, and they tried to figure out what makes a successful team. And they just couldn't figure it out, Michael. They studied 180 teams and they couldn't figure it out. And it didn't matter the individual performance. It didn't matter how they were making decisions. It didn't matter whether they were located in the same office. And only when they found the research on psychological safety, they cracked the code. It was psychological safety, which is the number one priority, according to research that Google did at the time, on high team performance. And that's why it's the number one priority in our meetings. And psychological safety means that people can take a risk in our meetings. They can share their unbaked idea. They can share a mistake. They can share a different view. And one of the best ways we have to establish that psychological safety, if that's so important, it is through authenticity, sharing our own mistakes, maybe. It is through empathy. And mostly it's through appreciation. When someone says something that doesn't make sense, we get curious. We say, okay, I'm missing something here. If you go with the belief, my team, my partners are brilliant. So if they say something that doesn't make sense, I get curious rather than judgmental. I will have more psychological safety in my meeting.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I really love, I think it's referred to as Project Aristotle, right, within Google. And this idea of ability to take risks or ability to be vulnerable, it matters immensely. So folks, anybody who is with us in live and in person, if you want to place into comments, is there a particular way that you're showing appreciation in meetings or for your colleagues? Like, so if you show appreciation, if you have a specific way that's meaningful to you, go ahead and put it in comments. I just want to see what other ideas we have flowing. So Katerina just gave us a little bit of a background as to why it's important, but don't be afraid to share in comments ways that you show appreciation for others. So I think we're in this environment, Katerina, where we think so much about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? And as we start to climb up that hierarchy, it really does matter. We're trying to get to that point of awareness or self-actualization, or how do we help others self-actualize? And the best way to do that is to genuinely allow others to show up in the way that's most important for them, right? It really does matter. So we desire to learn and we desire to help others learn in some meaningful way too. And again, folks, if you have some sort of a comment or question for Katerina, don't be afraid to put it in comments and we'll see if we can get to it and ask. But Katerina, I want to ask you another question. So in the second kind of part of the book in chapter 9, you talk about how do we reduce time wasted in meetings. And there are 6 types of meetings that you actually address in the book. And basically looking at it through the context of these 6 types of meetings are oftentimes held for the wrong reasons. And so how do we make sure that we really use the time well? So if you could just give just a little bit of context about why meetings for networking or why meetings for sharing best practices may be better facilitated some other way.
Good meetings need good relationships. But good relationships in the workplace do not necessarily need meetings. And by meetings, meaning we bring a group together for a purpose. That's the definition of a meeting. They need to work towards a common purpose. I've seen many teams, they hold the status updates, but their objective is team cohesion, networking. And that's the worst way to achieve that, because they are bored out of their mind. They're dreading this monthly status update. When I come in, I usually say, if your objective is team cohesion, don't do a status update, have social time. Unstructured. Call it monthly tea party or call it monthly, whatever fits your culture. Try to be inclusive. For networking and cohesion, I would say, and research has shown, if you're in the same office having meals at the same time, but even if you're remote, having unstructured social time or shared experiences, we've seen people now, they will have even improv classes remotely or cooking classes remotely. There's things you can do even if you're remote that will help you better achieve networking. Don't do a status update if your objective is team cohesion. And the other one you mentioned, sharing best practices. I've been through so many boring meetings watching my corporate life, watching people sharing best practices. And the problem was that there wasn't a match of demand and supply of the best practices. I would have to sit through 10 presentations to maybe find one that was relevant to my work. So there is a better way. I would say social networks, have a group, whether it is how you post, how you share information asynchronously, and have people post their wins, have people post their learnings, and have people ask for help when they need it. And someone will, and if you have a good culture, someone will jump in and share a tip. And that's how, like we have in Forbes Coaches Councils, now that I think about it, that's where I met you, Michael. We will share, ask for help when we need it, and we'll get it when we need it, rather than have meetings and sit through boring presentations.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a perfect example. I can't tell you, folks, how many times I've placed a comment or question into the Forbes Coaches Council kind of discussion board, and folks around the world provide really meaningful responses really quickly, and that matters. And so that's a great example, Katerina. Katerina, would you put up on the screen theleaderpath.com/book? So if anybody is really super interested in some of the things that Katerina has been talking about, here is the website at the bottom of your screen. Theleaderpath.com/book is the website where you can learn a little bit more about it. And so you can learn a little bit more about Katerina, a little bit more about the book and the bonuses that are available, which I'll describe here in a few minutes once we get close to half past the hour. So again, if you have comments or questions, don't be afraid to put them in chat. So I saw a couple of comments that came through, Katerina, about appreciation. So there was one from Andrew that's like, hey, sometimes showing appreciation to others is really about participating actively, showing up to a meeting on time. I think there was one organization that does monthly appreciation lunches, which is fantastic. Marcia said that she acknowledges employees' birthdays during virtual meetings by creating specific backgrounds, which is awesome. That's a really fun way to be able to honor another person. And I saw another one there a little bit at the bottom. Another question I think that I'll get to in a second. So each of us can display appreciation for those around us in a different way. And you can also see there at the very bottom of the comments, folks, Sophie just put in the link, theleaderpath.com/book. So it's there for you if you need it. And so we still have a few minutes here, Katerina. So I'm going to ask you one of the questions that just came through from one of the audience members. And so the question is, what information is best shared in a meeting versus being shared in other ways, right? So do you have just a couple of quick examples of that?
Yes.
Yeah.
I love that question, because I would say information sharing should not happening in meetings unless it's emotional, unless we expect emotional reaction. So if you have some good news, you got funding, or you have promotions, or you want to give someone a raise, do it in person. If you have bad news, do it in a meeting. Status updates and other information, it's better done asynchronously. You can send an email, you can have a video selfie, an audio note. There's no need to have everyone and do it at the same time. That said, so the objective of the meeting should not be information sharing unless it's an emotional information. That said, if the objective of the meeting is one of the 4Ds and you need some information, you have a choice to either send it beforehand, or you can have it in the first 10 minutes. Amazon, for example, they spend the first 10, 15 minutes reading a memo before they discuss a topic. Twitter do that. They start their meetings on a Google document and everyone goes and reads the information and they add comments. So I'm not saying you can't share information in a meeting. You shouldn't have meetings to share information. You don't need that. You can do that asynchronously.
Yeah, there's so many other. Yeah, asynchronously is a great approach. We just gave the example of Forbes Coaches Council. Maybe there's some sort of an internal discussion board that you have at your organization, whatever that is, like finding some sort of way to share that. But there's a good criteria that if it's a very emotional topic or a very emotional piece of information that others need to be able to be there to support one another, absolutely, right? Make sure that is shared. So if you have any other comments or questions, don't be afraid to put them into the comments bar. So when we think about a little bit towards the end of the book, Katerina, in chapter 12, you talk about how do we make sure that we finish meetings with impact, right? Really significant impact. So in your mind, what are those three things that ideally happen at the end of a meeting?
The first one is to get alignment where the group is. So many meetings we leave and we are not aware what the decision was made. I have clients, they say, we're not clear. We never make decisions, or we're not clear of the decisions. Or you may make a decision, but you haven't gotten the commitment of the group, and maybe someone goes and sabotages it later. So the first thing I would say, get alignment. You can simply ask, is everyone okay with where we ended up? The second is clarity about next steps. You want to say who will do what by when, or maybe you start preparing what needs to be discussed in the next meeting. And the third one is acknowledgement of the value created. If you run the meeting well, there's value created, and it's important to spend some time. I like closing my meetings with a closing round. I would say, what was the biggest takeaway from this meeting? What value we created? And to go through the appreciation in my team coaching session, I do like to actually, in the closing round, ask people to say something nice about the person next to them, or the person next to them, to create this warm feeling and build that culture. But the most to be able to do those three steps, which is alignment where the group is, clarity on next steps, and awareness of the value that we created, you need to start wrapping up 5-10 minutes before. Which I never used to do, because you don't want to interrupt the discussion, and then everybody leaves and there's nothing. Right now, I'm very strict. Okay, we reached where we reached. It's time to start wrapping up the meeting. What did we achieve?
I love it. All right. There's something about allowing others to have their voices and opinions heard, especially if you go around the table and allow everybody to speak. It matters immensely, right? I think about Gallup in their Q12. One of the questions that they often ask about employee engagement is this idea: do my opinions get heard by peers or by bosses, supervisors? So when our opinions are heard, it matters so much. So I'm glad that your structure allows for those things to happen very intentionally, and that we can close the meeting really, really solidly. So I mentioned at the beginning of our time together, I realize we're getting close to the end of, it's almost 9:30 on the West Coast of the United States and North America. So at the bottom of your screen, you can see the book launch bonuses. If you're interested in learning more about Katerina, the Leader Path, or even the book Hold Successful Meetings, you can buy your copy at that web address at the bottom of the screen, theleaderpath.com/book. And if you do it between now and Sunday, midnight, July the 18th, there are a series of bonuses that will be available to you. And there are a number of bonuses, like you have access to a bonus chapter that was not actually released in the book. There, you would have access to an exclusive interview with Professor Peter Hawkins to help you identify your team's purpose. There's another one, an exclusive interview with Professor David Clutterbuck that might help you with difficult conversations or additional information about difficult conversations. Katerina has also offered 20 different scripts that can help you navigate awkward situations within your meetings. And then also I threw in a free kind of complimentary course that I have on my website. So I have a 6-part online course that I wanted to offer to everybody as well. And so with the bonus chapter, the interviews with the 2 professors, 20 different scripts from Katerina, plus an online course from me, there's lots of different bonuses that you can get if you buy the book between now and midnight on Sunday. So website at the very bottom of the screen, leaderpath.com/book. And then after you make your purchase, if you can change the screen, Katerina, we want to make sure that after you purchase the book, you can forward your receipts to the specific email address that you see at the bottom of the screen, book@leaderpath.com. And so as we think about these various things, there's a lot of stuff that happens in meetings, right? And I asked you at the very beginning of our time together, what % of your meetings are actually value add? And after I've read the book and I've gone back and skimmed it multiple times for conversations that I've had with clients, it struck me how important the various details that Katerina talks through in the book, how important they are to make sure that we're maximizing our meetings for lots of different purposes. So now consider, like, if you were to apply some of the strategies that Katerina and I just discussed, I bet my intuition, like, it's telling me that a much larger percentage of your meetings would actually be value add and successful. So I really encourage you to visit theleaderpath.com/book. If you choose to buy the book, you can email your receipt to book@theleaderpath.com, and that'll get you access to those bonuses. So if you're not already, I would really encourage you to follow Caterina on social media. There's a couple different places where she's pretty actively engaged, of course, on LinkedIn, a little bit on Instagram. There's a lot of wonderful insights that she's been sharing via short videos. And so you get little snippets of the book and of the work that she does for folks around the world via some of that video. So I love watching them. So thank you, Katarina, so much for doing that. So you'll get tons of video, tons of helpful resources, tons of ideas about really making sure that you can, in your own way, become a coach and hold successful meetings. So I'm going to bring our time together to a close. For everybody who attended with us live, thank you so much for your time. Katarina, thank you so much for your time today, for putting the effort into publishing the book and helping the world in your own unique way, because it really is powerful. So thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful day. We'll talk soon.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.